Episode 86 of the podcast. This week we're talking about the many ways that dogs and humans can be injured during the grooming process and how that ties in with the need to address behavior issues. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. This week I want to talk a little bit about injuries, and we're going to start off with injuries to dogs, because a lot of our behavior problems that we see are when injuries happen. That's when dogs get hurt, people get hurt, equipment gets broken, customers get frustrated or angry, people get frustrated or angry, right? But the injuries to the dogs, so the most obvious of the injuries to the dogs would be nicks or cuts from our equipment. Or even, bleeding between gums when they bite a brush, things like that. Those are the most obvious that most people associate with grooming injuries, is that the dog turned around fast and got stabbed with the scissors or got sliced or the clipper blade nicked them someplace. We can't discount those as something preventable. In many, many cases, if we're aware of behavior, we can prevent those. We can be thinking ahead of time, hey, I'm a little bit worried that this dog is going to do something foolish, this dog is going to do something unpredictable, and how can I try to maintain as much safety as possible before I get, something close to his eye, or how can I work out of reach of his head? How can I help him be calm, comfortable, cooperative? I know you guys have heard that a lot. But nicks and cuts are the most obvious way for a dog to get hurt during a grooming appointment or during a vet visit, depending on what you're using. Plenty of dogs are being clippered at the vets or having, hemostats near them. There are lots of things that can happen. Let me do another one. This one's really important. The injuries to a dog's neck, right? I want you to think about when we have a dog on a grooming loop, if they start to struggle, we really need to calm them down. And I know there are various schools of thought out there, and I'm going to present the one that I'm coming from based on my agricultural background and my vet tech background. Is an animal that is struggling by being held by its neck, like if we tie a horse with a halter or a cow by a halter and they start to struggle, they're likely to get some sort of a neck injury. And that can happen on our grooming tables, right? So sometimes we're using that grooming loop to prevent a dog from being able to turn around. And I understand why we use them. I use them too. But I want calm use. I want us to always be thinking about keeping that dog calm, comfortable, and cooperative, because a dog that is flailing around and flipping around like a trout on a line is very likely to injure their neck. Not just strangulation. I think we tend to think about, well, it's like being on a leash and a collar, and if it's not choking him, if it's not actually constricting. But even if they're on something like a loop that doesn't constrict, the ones I use don't constrict. They clip, so they're one set length. But if you pull against a neck, it's going to cause an injury. So we need to be thinking about neck injuries as part of what injuries a dog could have through the grooming process, and why using the loop to control them is part of how we can help them calm down. But if we're just using it to control them and they're pulling really, really hard, you know what? There are a lot of things can happen to their neck. And they can be choking themselves, lack of oxygen. They can raise their blood pressure. That's when you start seeing like bloodshot eyes. That's when you have to really worry about the brachycephalic dogs with the eyeballs that already protrude, things like that. But it's not good for any dog's health. We don't want them pulling on their neck. So nicks and cuts was the first one. Neck injuries, the second one. Now the third one that I'm going to add is I'm going to add the twists, sprains, soft tissue issues, right? When they're twisting around on a foot, they could sprain something, they could rip something, they could just have a soft tissue injury and walk away limping, or walk away a little bit off and favoring a leg, or maybe not show any signs until the next day because they've still got, adrenaline pumping through their body and they're walking pretty straight on all fours by the time they leave because they're just darting off to be freed. We need to be thinking about when we're holding something, if a dog is pulling away from us, that is another potential injury. So if we're holding a paw and we're trying to get a dog to calm down, it's better for us to actually try to help them calm down than to wait them out. And I'm saying that because there's a different school of thought here. So I want all of you to come to your own conclusions based on other people's methods and be thinking about the way things are presented. So if I have a dog who is worried about their leg, I might back off a little bit and help them calm down and then release the leg before I do maybe the nail trim or some brushing. But just give them the chance to calm down and experience having their leg held while they're calm before I move on to please hold your leg, be calm, and let me put clippers next to it, So I want you to be thinking about calming them down because every time you're holding on to a leg or you're holding on to an ear or you're holding on to a tail and that dog starts pulling away and flailing around, there's a potential for injury. Small dogs, medium dogs, large dogs, long spines, doesn't matter. All of those dogs could become injured by pulling away from us. And I want you to really take that in, right. I mean, we get injured when they're pulling away from us. That's in the second part when we talk about human injuries. But that pulling, that's a lot of work. That's a struggle. And that's when we can start getting sprains and strains. You could dislocate a joint. There are lots of things that can happen if we're allowing twisting and pulling and not helping them calm down. Now, the next one I'm going to list is stress-related issues, injuries related to stress or health issues related to stress. Because when a body is under stress, I want you to circle back to terms that we've heard before, right? The adrenaline response, fight or flight response, the balance of epinephrine and norepinephrine, the parasympathetic nervous system, right? When your body is under stress, it's a chemical reaction. It's, okay, let's add this chemical into your bloodstream to get your heart pumping faster, to get more blood and more oxygen to your muscles so that you can escape or fight back. And that's the fight or flight response. So when a dog is under stress, they're also having they're breathing faster, their heart starts beating faster, they're just looking around for what's happening next, and they're stressed out. Now, stress-related issues with that could be a dog who has a heart attack on your table. It could be a dog that has a stroke on your table. That could be a dog who has a seizure on your table, right? And that certainly can lead to overheating. And overheating is actually the most common of them all because it's not so much about whether or not a dog is in a hot room or potentially under a hot dryer, but if they're panting and they're overheating simply because their heart rate is boosted, their respirations are faster, if they're overheating because of stress, and we know that overheating can cause its own set of injuries, right? That we need to get that under control. So when we start talking about the kind of injuries that a dog can sustain in a grooming shop, now I want you to start thinking all of those things are what we're trying to prevent when we talk to our owners about calm, comfortable, and cooperative. About teaching their dogs to be good, about teaching their dogs to be able to handle the grooming process, about lowering the expectation of owners that, if he has an issue, we're going to try to help him be calm. We're going to try to help him understand that this is okay. And we're going to work toward long-term acceptance of this, that the dog is going to feel better about it. Not just today, but by the end of the grooming, we're going to see improvement because we're going to work toward it. And the expectation is not going to be that the trim is going to be fantastic. I kind of don't care about fantastic trims on a dog who could have one of these many injuries because of a behavior problem. And again, Those injuries, things like nicks and cuts, neck injuries, twists, sprains, heart attacks, strokes, seizures, overheating, right? All of those things can be part of the behavior problem that we're seeing just erupting into a big fight. So a lot of the time, we're thinking in terms of getting the trim done, and it's just a couple of minutes, right? Like we're holding a leg and it's just for a minute, and if I can just hold him steady long enough to get that done, I mean, what's the harm? What's the harm? But, and we'll talk about human injuries in the next part, I can tell you what the harm is on my own arm in the past when I've had to do that. I'm holding a dog and they're fighting back and I'm fighting back because I didn't always train this way and I didn't always groom this way, right? And my own arm is really sore. Like the next day I'm like, oh, I don't want to pick anything up. My arm's sore, right? We can relate to that. We can relate to the fact that struggling hurts. And honestly, if it's a behavior problem, we have solutions for behavior problems. So we need to make sure that our owners understand why we're trying to solve the behavior problem. And if they are not interested, it's either they still don't understand yet, or they're not your customer, right? And I've said that before, but it's either they don't understand or they're not your customer. If they truly do not care, I don't care if this dog has a heart attack. It's not even my dog. I didn't care about even having him. If he has a heart attack on your table, fine. We run into those people. They're pretty rare, though. They're pretty rare. So make sure that we're setting this up as a discussion points with owners, but also amongst ourselves as groomers, right? Before we start saying, hey, what kind of muzzle do you guys use? We should probably also be asking, hey, what do you guys do with dogs who are used to having to need a muzzle? How can we help this dog be better for it? Right now we're using a muzzle and I'm hoping that we can teach him to be better. These are the kind of discussions we as professionals need to start having. Because I'll tell you what, twists and sprains and neck injuries, nicks and cuts because a dog is flailing around. The dogs who are good for grooming, who are well behaved, rarely ever suffer any of these kind of injuries, right? They're not flailing around by their neck. They're not flopping around like a trout on a line. They're not pulling their leg and yelping and worrying about ripping a tendon. They're not having this like overheated heart attack, seizure. We're not worried about them as much because they're under control. They're calm about it. They're paying attention. They're trying to let us do our job, right? So the behavior component is essential. Not just, hey, it would be kind of nice to know more about behavior. It's essential. It's a big part of what we do. The dogs who are good for grooming at some point needed to learn about grooming. And maybe they were just super accepting. But most of the dogs, a healthy dog can be taught to be a safe dog. They may never love it, but they can be taught to be safe. The dogs with health issues are often dogs that we have to kind of work around. But some of those health issues could be physical. Some of those could be brain issues, which is also physical, chemical, right? But I want you to be thinking about safety starts with keeping this dog from all of these behavior problems becoming an injury. Behavior problems are when dogs get hurt, people get hurt, equipment gets broken, and owners and groomers and people in general get upset. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes and tell all of your friends. Let's talk a little bit about the injuries that humans can get while trying to groom a dog, or work at a vet's office, or really any time that we're handling dogs. So the most obvious of those injuries that we can sustain is a bite. And I think that most of us are expecting like, oh yeah, dogs can bite you. Now our owners often think that's the only way that we would get hurt, is a dog bite. And most of them are convinced that their dog would never bite, or think just put a muzzle on him. Like, oh, okay, now he can't bite and everybody's going to be just fine, So not only do we have to worry about the injury from the bite, but for many dogs with tooth issues, we really have to worry about some of the infections and stuff we can get from their rotted face holes, right? They've got these rotted teeth. Now it's different than just a bite. It's different than just a puncture and some saliva. Now it's like rotted teeth, whatever plaque and pus is coming out of their mouth. And I know we're getting so gross here, but I really want you to think that some of these older dogs that people are like, oh, he doesn't really have many teeth left. Yeah, what he has is like a cesspool, a really infectious mouth, and I need to worry even more about that puncturing my skin, right? Generally, we don't want to get bit, but I want you to be thinking there are different levels of bites too. And if you work with cats, there's of course the cat scratches and cat bites can be really, really bad, you know? So bites are the most obvious. The next one is scratches. Scratches, we get ripped up when we're trying to hold a dog who's struggling. All right? And maybe it only happens for half a second, because even if you are trying to keep a dog calm, comfortable, and cooperative, there are times where something, you turn on a piece of equipment or the sprayer gets a little bit close to their belly and they jump out of their skin, I've got some scratches right now on my wrist that are probably going to scar because here I am in my late 40s and my skin doesn't heal like it used to. But because your wrist is such an odd place to try to keep a bandage on, that it just keeps getting opened up over and over and over again, right? Owners aren't thinking about the kind of injuries we can get while we're holding a dog who is struggling, a dog who's having a hard time. Not a dog who's being bad, a dog who is having a hard time. A dog who is not calm, comfortable, and cooperative. A dog who is trying to escape, who's trying to break free, or trying to make us back away from him, right? They're not thinking about scratches as part of that. And I'll tell you, scratches are a big one. And even if you're wearing like jeans or something and you don't get the physical scratch, God only knows how many bruises and welts we build up by picking up a dog who isn't used to being picked up, right? And the owners, sometimes you can guess that the dog isn't used to being picked up, but others you expect them to at least know how to be picked up. But you come to find out that they don't know that. When I meet a new dog, I kind of assume that we're going to have problems. I think that's just a nice, healthy mindset. Years and years and years have told me, just assume that there's going to be some sort of an issue, right? Assume that when you go to lift them in the tub, their legs are going to go flying everywhere. Try to prevent that, try to protect yourself from that, try to help them be calm, but assume that they're going to have an issue so that you don't innocently go to pick up a Labrador Retriever who's apparently never been picked up in his whole entire life and get gouged. But those scratches, welts, bruises, oh my God. Yeah, those really at the end of the day are what make groomers really frustrated, right? I don't know about you guys, but think about, oh, hey, I can't wait to go to that wedding, and how am I going to cover up all this crap on my arms? I've told friends yeah, I don't wear makeup, but you've seen me in makeup because there was at least one wedding I went to with a cat scratch down my face that you guys didn't notice. They're like, what? So those scratches, bangs, bruises, we get our skin ripped up. And there's no need for it if our owners know that we're going to take it slow and we're going to be patient with their dog and that we are going to address the behavioral component, right? He's not a stuffed animal, right? She's not one of the fur dog things that we practice on, right? This is a living being. And we need to be thinking about how this living being is interacting with us for us to get our job done safely. Safely for the dog and safely for us. Now, here is another way that humans can get hurt. Twists and sprains and soft tissue injuries. Much like I was saying with the dogs, right? You're trying to hold a dog and they're pulling away from you or kicking into you. And next thing you know, you've pulled your shoulder out or you've torqued your back, right? Maybe it's just trying to pull a dog closer to you from the tub, and you're reaching in and you're trying to pull them closer to you. And now your arm's really sore for a day, Maybe it's a matter of like just getting caught off guard and having to restrain a dog who needs help getting off of the grooming table. People don't think about that, and we need to educate our customers. If he gets worried on the grooming table and I have to help him down, right? There's no Pomeranian that I'm going to allow to jump off the table. Right? But he's still a twisting, twirling, you know, ball of 10 pounds that wants to get away. People get hurt. People get hurt. And often we're getting hurt because owners don't know to work on it and we don't know how to talk to them about it. We should be talking to them about it. There's a whole customer service angle to this that I've been trying to promote for a while, because if we explain to owners what we need, many of them will start to have their little breakthrough moment where they're like, right. I wasn't even thinking about safety. They don't think about safety, right? So, and here's another way that humans can get hurt. Those nicks and cuts, right? We get them too. I cannot tell you how many times I have nicked myself with the scissors, with my shears, because a dog kicked and I just moved away from the dog as fast as I could, right? And who cares if I get hurt? I'm just protecting the dog on my table, right? We've all had something like that happen. We're protecting the dog on the table. I'll take one for the team, right? We get hurt. How about when a dog kicks equipment? You're holding up a pair of shears and the dog kicks your hand while your shears are there. There's a way to get hurt. I don't leave scissors on my table. I like to have either they're on a table behind me, or I have one of the little pocket holster things in my grooming smock that I can put scissors into and get them off my table. Because as my friend Michelle had mentioned, that, you know what? She had a dog kick her shears and they stabbed her in the arm and she has nerve damage, right? These are ways that we get hurt. Kicking and causing us nicks and cuts, causing us nicks and cuts with our equipment, right? We get hurt. So when we talk about behavior problems, right, I want you to be thinking about ways that dogs get hurt, the ways that people get hurt, right? And we haven't even talked yet about how equipment gets broken, but I think we all know how equipment gets broken. But dogs get hurt, and it's not the most obvious, like, look, there was a little slice on his ear, yeah, we know that happens, but what about the dog that's exhausted and limping the next day? I get some of my customers that way, guys. Some of my customers came to me because they were like, you know what, we're just so worried. We don't know what happened there, but he was limping the next day. He was really sore, and they said nothing happened. And I'm not going to throw other groomers under the bus, but I understand why owners would want someone in the house that they could watch the whole time. Right? I get it. And when they see how their dog behaves, and when I calm their dog down again and explain to them this is why your last groomer didn't get the face the perfect way you wanted them to, because we have some work we have to do first, right? Like, I'm not going to throw other groomers under the bus, but I understand why people want to see it. People want to see it. They want to see that you are behaving in a reasonable way, that we're not hitting their dog with sticks. So I want you to think about the dogs that are really, really good for grooming. They're taught to be good. Or maybe they never had a problem with it, but at some point they had to learn to be good. And the dogs who are good behaviorally for grooming rarely get hurt. The dogs who are really good for grooming rarely hurt groomers. The dogs who are really good for grooming, right, rarely hurt their vet or their veterinary technicians, right? They are much better for things like blood drawing and range of motion and being held for x-rays and all of those other procedures in their life, right? They're also much more likely to be good for their owners when their owner finds themselves needing to give ear medication twice a day, or eye ointment, or eye drops, or cleaning bums, right? An owner that has to check a bleeding paw, right? We need to be thinking about the behavior is so super important, right? This behavior portion dogs that are well behaved are safer. They're safer for themselves. They're safer for us. They're safer for their owner. They're safer for the vet. And we need to be more educated in our industries about how to make dogs safer for the procedures they're going to have to go through. Now, from a grooming point of view, that means that groomers, I want you to learn more about training and training procedures and the terminology and how it all works. For trainers, that means I want you to know more about grooming and the grooming procedures and what is expected from a dog during grooming. And the vets and the vet techs kind of need to know a little bit of both. Ideally, we would all be learning about the other jobs. I think that's really important for us all to be learning about the other jobs so that we can prepare dogs who are able to be good little citizens for the 15 years that they're going to be alive or more. But I usually tell people, like, base it on 15 years, right? That dog is going to get groomed a lot in 15 years, right? We're going to spend time teaching him to be good. Its time has come. It is really important. Right? And we need to know why it's important. And that is injuries to dogs and injuries to people can be prevented through training. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast or the Facebook page Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.